Hey, welcome to another Get Geekish podcast. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Bino, joined by Derek over there. And we're doing this thing every week where we, talk about geeky, nerdy, random things. And we appreciate you for joining in the conversation. Hit us up on the social medias at Get Geekish. And this week we wanted to talk a little bit about being awkward. I don't know about you. This is right in my wheelhouse, we'll call it. But there's a lot of scenes in movies, and this comes up because of the most recent episode of The Mandalorian, episode 2. I'm not giving spoilers away or anything like that, other than the fact that there's everything on social media is about the little child eating eggs. And some people are mortally disturbed by how it all goes down. And so we thought we'd talk about that and some of the most other awkward scenes that have been put in movies and TV shows that you're watching and going, is this a part of the show? Why is this even here? So if you got some of those, we'd love to hear them. And now we're going to talk about some of our things. So you were going to say something about the child there.
Well, it was one of those ones where right away when they showed the eggs, I was like, he's going to eat them. And my wife was like, nah. And I was like, yeah. And then, of course, he eats them. And I'm like, he likes frog things. So why wouldn't he eat those eggs that look like... They reminded me of the pickled eggs from Moe's bar in The Simpsons.
Yeah, that's right. They did look a lot like those. Very much like those.
So, yeah, I mean, I
gotta say, I was a little weirded out by it when I saw it. Like, because it was... the show did make it very clear that they were unfertilized eggs. They made clear notice of that. But it was the fact that the mom that laid the eggs in the backpack she was carrying on is sitting in the front seat, and he's like, hey, snackies. And he goes back for more.
I mean, how is that any different than having a chicken coop out in your backyard? And
that's what I said. It's not. That's why I was when I saw it, I was weirded out. But I'm like, well, it's not that big a deal. But I have a feeling with the fact that as what biggest stink as everyone's making about it, the fact that there's already a marketed toy of the child with the backpack full of eggs, that there's going to be something that comes back around those things. Like him eating them is going to be it's going to be those pine trees that have to get in a forest fire before they hatch. Like maybe these eggs have to be run through a childlike creature before they can hatch or something, or there's going to be some mystical power unlocked, or
maybe they're the powers that be have a child eating eggs board game ready to launch down the line. So
and somebody else made an interesting plot, because I had that thought too. My thought was, well, maybe is there something going on there that like these Yoda creatures are going to be some like super alpha predator? And somebody else came like that maybe when Yoda was back on Dagobah, maybe it wasn't hiding out, maybe he just went there and was the apex predator and just like ate everything on the planet. He's like, I'm a king, I'll live in this swamp for eternity.
Right.
I mean, king I will be.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
King I will be.
So speaking of awkward,
eat things I will. But Star Wars itself is no stranger to putting somewhat awkward scenes in movies. I mean, I think first one that comes to my mind is the milking and drinking the blue alien milk from Mr. Skywalker. I don't know why that part of the scene was there, because I understand, like, yes, he's on a forbidden, hidden away on a planet and living off of the Earth and all this stuff, but it seemed really, really graphic and specific. Like, I get a little weirded out watching somebody drink milk from a cow.
Yeah, like freshly from the cow?
Yeah, like, I mean, squirt some of this in my mouth, like, don't remind me.
Yeah, I remember watching this scene, I was like, well, why is this here? Like, this scene did not need to be here. I didn't need to really know the origin
of where he got his blue milk. But it seemed like a weird plot detail to put in there.
No, that just seemed like fan service.
Fan service, though? What Star Wars fan was clamoring for him to milk a giant...
some people were sitting there, they're just yucking it up going...
I finally got my answer to the blue milk question, guys. Watch this. And they also started off, when Lucas redid the original Star Wars movies and then put in all the CGI extras, almost every single one of those sticks out like a sore thumb, not just from being drastically different in how it's edited or what it looks like, but why on earth is there 3.5 minutes of exotic woman alien dancing in this movie now? Like, it doesn't add anything to the plot. It's like, oh, look, we got CGI. Yay.
That one, I mean, the original trilogy that he butchered by adding those back into them, parts of it I could see added some to it, but like you said, it sticks out like a sore thumb. You're just sitting there watching it, and you're like, because I remember I made my wife sit through and watch them because she had never really seen them, and when we were watching them, I was like, this scene wasn't originally there. This scene wasn't originally there, and that whole awkward scene of Han Solo and Jabba the Hutt.
Mm-hmm.
In A New Hope when he's walking and he steps on him and everything like that. I was like, that scene could have been cool back when this originally came out. But CGIing a weird Jabba the Hutt in it, especially now that we know that what he looks like in Return of the Jedi, you're just like, that one's just that one's just awkward.
Yeah, it stands out, and it just leaves more questions than answers in the movie. I was looking on my wife pointed out one in the Lord of the Rings movies. The second one, when they're trying to escape all the hobbits are in the barrels going down the river trying to escape. It's kind of an awkward scene, and I'm assuming it's a book because I'll let it be known I know I've never actually read the Lord of the Rings books. I made it through about 50 pages of the first one and couldn't take it anymore. But I like the movies.
Isn't the barrel one in? Yeah, it's in the Hobbit.
Is this the second Hobbit one? Okay, yeah.
I thought it was in the first Hobbit. And the Hobbit trilogy itself is awkward, and why did they need to stretch a single book into?
Yeah, but the scene with the barrels gets me because the barrels themselves, the scene itself is okay. It's haha, they're escaping in barrels, whatever. But it's when they switch to the. Looks like they strapped a GoPro on one of the barrels going down the river, so it looks like a commercial for an amusement park ride. In this full cinematic glory of Lord of the Rings, and then it's like, dude, slap the GoPro on that guy. We're putting that in.
Yeah, that's another one where you're sitting there watching. You're like, you guys, when you're watching the dailies and you're going through and editing and everything like that. Why did you keep that in? Well, I know that I'm not the only one. Like, you grew up with Indiana Jones, a beloved character, right? Mm-hmm. Crystal Skull came out. And there's quite a few just awkward scenes in that movie itself with the CGI prairie dogs, the nuking of the fridge, the ants, and everything like that. But the scene that always drives me the craziest besides the ending of it.
The last 20 minutes of the movie just doesn't exist.
Right. Him... Shia LaBeouf swinging through the jungle, trying to catch up to the convoy on vines with monkeys around him. I remember just watching that whole part going, what? What? Is this happening?
It takes a movie that has already got unbelievable in it because of the nature of what it is and takes it that next level where you can't even like immerse yourself and, this is fun to believe. No.
How can a convoy that's traveling, straight lines down the road and then turning everything like that, how can he keep up with them swinging on vines with all these CGI-looking monkeys? It doesn't make any sense.
I figure that's like... that reminds me of the Hobbs and Shaw. One particular scene that jumped out. I mean, there's a lot in this movie that is awkward, but for what it is, it fits what it is. But the scene when... The Rock is hanging from a helicopter holding on the bumper of a car and uses his manly Captain America muscles to pull the helicopter down out of the sky. You're like, you could have just had him flex in front of the window when he was getting dressed and got the same effect in here. Like, why are we going on this that the dude pulled a helicopter out of the sky?
I mean, to be honest, you could look at most of the movies in the Fast and Furious franchise and...
Yeah, but even those, I mean, they're fitting for what they are. It's unbelievable, that crazy car, but... One dude in a helicopter. Come on now. This is the hill I am prepared to die on, all right?
Apparently.
How about... go for it.
Go ahead.
I was going to bring up Batman vs. Superman.
Yeah, and Martha.
Which, another one. Lots of misgivings in this movie and a lot of polarizing parts of fans. But the fact that they're having this gargantuan fight, destroying things, throwing punches and kicks, destroying cities, and he's got the other one in a chokehold... And Batman finds out that Superman's mother's also named Martha. And suddenly everything changes. Like, You know somebody named Martha, too. We should be pals. Like, they were literally trying to murder each other. Oh, but we know somebody with the same name. Oh, cool, bro.
I'm pretty sure when I saw that movie in the theater, I audibly went, what? Because, yeah, it's this whole, I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, you're not really missing much, but...
I wonder, because I haven't watched the full Schneider cut or whatever, if in the long version they made more of an explanation, because I could see it working in there as if Superman knew something about Bruce Wayne's mom and was trying to get him to remember his mom, but not just blurting out Martha in a gasping breath and suddenly magically problems are solved.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to wait for the Snyder cut to be released, but I mean, there's there's already 2 different cuts of that movie, and then they're going to release the Snyder cut, so maybe it'll do explanation. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath for that one. What about the scene that's behind your head there?
So, fun fact, I've only seen one Twilight movie, and that was the first one, and there is a ton of awkward moments. I was just sitting there watching that thing going, why? Why did this need to be in it? Like, I don't even know. Like, the whole, grab on Spider Monkey, and he puts her in and just, clambers up in the tree and everything. I'm like, seriously, dude? My wife's like, I know, it's stupid. I'm sorry. Just watch the movie, okay? So, that whole... I mean, the whole first movie to me, and I have not seen any of them since. So you
haven't seen the fight scene that's behind you?
No, I just read in a part that this was an awkward part, so...
It did seem fairly...
out of place.
For what the movies did to the books... If you want to see our dissertation on this with actual fans of Twilight, you can go back, search from our previous podcast, where it's on this, go full depth into how we know nothing about it, and for good reason, but other people enjoy it. That's cool. But this whole movie that had I think this is the same one that had the baseball scenes that just seemed...
Well, the baseball scenes was in the first movie.
Was that the first movie?
Yeah. I mean, the music was cool, but I was like, why are they playing baseball? I mean, there might be a baseball scene in this movie. I don't know. I haven't seen it. So
they all blended together. But I remember the fight scene coming out, and I don't think it matched anything like the books was, from what I hear. And it felt like this murderous bloodbath that came out of nowhere, because the rest of the movie tried to be kind of taming things down. And you're like, whoa! Why are there so many people here now? Like, the entire movie, there's 8 people the entire story house, and now suddenly there's hundreds of them all gathered in this. Yeah, don't get me started.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of movies that do that, where they just throw in a lot of CGI background fighting that kind of you want to just see the focal point, right? You want to see what's happening between the main characters. And yeah, Lord of the Rings is guilty of this. Most superhero movies are guilty of this when they have a whole bunch of people fighting. They want to do it as just B-roll, basically, fill time. But I think they could cut out a lot of that. I mean, speaking of cutting out stuff, cutting out some of the fight stuff, focusing mainly on just one person. Or if you want to go to the J.J. Abrams route or Michael Bay route, cut out some of the slow motion. We get it. It's a helicopter flying in slow motion, because it kind of takes away. It's one of those awkward things where you're sitting here, you're watching you're watching Bad Boys or something, and all of a sudden it's action, 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 and then it cuts to the next scene where it's a helicopter going in slow motion. We get it. I mean, the first Transformers is way guilty of that.
Yeah, Bad Boys 2, to me, is 3 consecutive 40-plus minute car chases.
It's a long movie, and that's the thing is you look at Transformers, you look at Bad Boys, you look at the Michael Bay movies, or even J.J. Abrams. At least J.J. Abrams is kind of admitted now that the lens flares, he may have used too many of them. But Michael Bay and all the other movies that just rely heavily on that slow motion, we get it. It has a time and a place, but most of the time it's just kind of awkward, and it just takes away.
Slow motion can be amazing. I remember the first time they used it for The Matrix with that 3D spin around slow motion and the dodging bullets. It was earth-shattering. But even then, it was 3 little scenes in the movie. It wasn't every fight scene. Oh, we'll slow every punch down and every kick down, and and CGI somehow is more impressive when it's real things being slowed down. But when it's slow motion CGI, it doesn't seem near as impressive.
Yeah. Ooh.
Looks like the intro to an Xbox game. Cool. All right, back to awkward movie moments. Let's. How about we throw it back to Grease?
So, fun fact, not a fan of that movie, but I know you're talking about the ending because it's so stupid.
I mean, I suppose it really laid the groundwork for Grease too, but but if you haven't seen Grease, spoiler at the end, they fly away in a car. I mean, 30-somethings that are pretending to be high schoolers that sing and dance and get in fights and then fall in love with each other, and they drive their T-Bird off into the sky. I'm assuming it's supposed to be a metaphor, but they literally drove off in a flying car. Doesn't make any sense. They could have just literally driven down the street into the sunset, and it would have made plenty of sense.
Yeah, that's. I mean, there's some awkward things, like if you look back at and read more into that movie, but yeah, that part was. It was why, and you and I had a conversation too about this one where you had Bruce Banner and Black Widow kind of having that weird romantic love story out of nowhere in Age of Ultron.
Mm-hmm.
You and I talked about it after the movie because I was like, that was a little weird to me, like because they didn't hint at it in the first Avengers movie. Comics, I'm sure, but all of a sudden Age of Ultron, and it's just like kind of forced. Like all of a sudden they have this bond and this like, you know,
yeah,
the sun's
like
getting low.
we've been gone for a year and we fell in love.
Yeah.
Say what now? How what?
Why?
And love in the Avengers movie, I think we could top that with when Captain America kisses Peggy Carter's niece in Civil War.
Well, so when you're watching Civil War, you're like, eh. But now it's even more awkward knowing the end of the whole fight with Thanos and how everything goes on that one.
Mm-hmm.
that makes it a little bit more awkward since that whole ending and how he ends his route.
Yeah, that's a little questionable antics going on there. But even that, I mean, prior to, aside from the Endgame ending changing the dynamics of that scene, won't give that away in case somebody hasn't seen that yet.
Right.
But we'll lay the groundwork that in Captain America he falls in love with Peggy Carter and then he gives up his life trying to save her, and then he's unfrozen and she's super old and she passes away. So if you fell in love with somebody and then got cryogenically frozen for 50 years and woke up, would you be trying to hit up their daughter?
No, like all the family members would be.
That seems just a little uncouth, a little weird.
Their daughter. Well, I mean, because this is the niece, but even still, that's like.
Can you imagine the scene after that? Though they do their little kissy kiss, then wow, you kiss way better than your mom. Like, nope, whole lot of nope.
What about let's go the awkward, because we've all watched movies with our parents younger,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's been awkward scenes that pop up. You're like, ooh, and I hope they don't.
They're not going there. They are. Oh boy.
And I'm talking about the quote unquote romantic scene in Ghostbusters, where
The funny thing, I didn't even get that when I was a kid.
I didn't either.
I was probably in a high school or college. I watched it like, wait a second, that ghost is good. Wait, rewind that.
As a kid, I was just like, oh, the ghost must have passed through him or something. No, you watch it now, and I mean, we're parents now. We've let our kids watch this movie, and that scene comes on, you're like,
yeah, there. Yeah. Look over there.
yeah. What's that ghost doing?
And I'm not even sure, since this our podcast is replayed on a radio station, I'm
Yeah.
Struggling how to describe the scene with Dan Aykroyd and the ghost finds ways to make Dan Aykroyd very happy for a scene in the movie.
Yeah, makes him go cross-eyed. You'll know what we're talking about if you pop in Ghostbusters, or if you just watched it recently because of Halloween. You're like, oh yeah. I mean, and there were some scenes too, even in Beetlejuice, where you're like, as a kid, I was like, I didn't get it, and then you watch it now, like with the whole cat house and everything like that. You're like, oh,
That's much funnier now.
but that's kind of awkward and out of place when you're watching it with your parents.
How about another one? Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I only say this because we're in the middle. We're reading some of the books with our youngest right now, so kind of reliving whole book series through it now, which is kind of fun. But this made it stick out like a sore thumb when I watched the movie recently. In the opening shot of Prisoner of Azkaban, it shows Harry doing homework by performing magic in his room. And it's a really cool shot that, some director was like, oh, this is going to be beautiful, perfect way to open the movie, blah, blah, blah. But anyone that paid any attention knows that that's against every magical law in the entire Harry Potter universe for him to be doing it at home. And one of the major plot points in that universe is that Harry is in trouble for using magic outside of Hogwarts, and they're trying to chase him down. So the opening shot of him like, oh, look, I'm doing magic in my room.
Well, I mean, how many movies actually do open up with him doing magic when he's not at Hogwarts anyway? So
that's true, but still, it's the weird thing to hang your hat on as the opening movie of like to really show like I have no idea what my source material is. Isn't this beautiful?
Right. Well, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast right there of how movies take liberties that they shouldn't. From books.
Yeah, remind me to talk about I Am Number 4.
I mean, like I said, there's a lot. That'll be a whole different podcast. So we'll put a pin in that one, and we'll circle back to that one because there's a lot of movies that have done good for books, but a lot of times it's the whole like, why did they put that in there? It's the awkward, out of place scene that does not need to be in there.
Mm-hmm. I would throw that Jurassic World has one of those.
They probably have a few of them.
Probably a few, but the one that sticks out to me is the pterodactyl scene when Zara, the assistant, gets eaten by the Mosasaurus. Because most of the movie, this sounds weird, but it's a feel-good movie. There's not a ton of super violence in the Jurassic World movie. I mean, there's some.
You're saying that really violent death is just kind of like, whoa.
Yeah, it's go through, and then they see her get taken off by the pterodons or pterodactyls, and then she gets chomped up by the jumping Mosasaurus. And it's not even just like a gump, she's gone. It jumps up, and you can still see her like trying to claw her way out of his throat as he's going back down. Like, it's one of those like stomach churning, like, oh, that's really graphic. But it kind of just a little bit of distaste.
I was thinking the scene of her running in high heels from a T-Rex.
Well,
that one always just kind of like.
Well, the other part of that, now that you say it out loud, and I remember the very end when she turns to start being good, and suddenly all she has to do is unbutton the top of her blouse, and then suddenly she's super strong and athletic and can climb over walls. Up to that point, she's prissy and dainty and all, but wait, I can help. Let me unbutton my top. Right. I am here.
Yeah, it's a whole, like, you watch other movies where girls are running or everything like that in heels, and they're like kick them off and everything like that so they can run. And then this movie, she kept them on, and I get that it's probably like a statement of power and everything like that. But at the same time, it's like, especially when all the females around you're going, that can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried running in heels?
Another one that the Star Trek Into Darkness scene. When Carol's talking to Kirk in the little shuttle and he turns around to talk to her and she's changing clothes, and there's just that like 4.5 second scene where she's standing there in a bra and nothing else. Like, I know what that part of the movie was probably directed right at my demographic, but it was so awkward. You're like, why is she half naked? Okay.
There's a lot of movies that, especially from the 80s up to like the mid 2000s, that had that scene. The comedies and action movies were the worst offenders of it, where they had that scene just to cater, like you said, to our demographic of like, hey, check out this hot girl. But if you take it out, it doesn't change anything about the movie. It's just kind of placed in there for gratification that doesn't need to be placed in there.
Well, especially for that particular scene, they were having a like plot-centric conversation, so it kind of took away. You're like, wait, something important just happened. What's going on?
Rewind it. We can't. We're at the movie theater. Oh. I mean, there's a lot of movies where you're watching. Well, I mean, even now as adults, with, as parents, we watch some of the 80s movies that we grew up with that, didn't seem anything, and you watch them and you're like, ooh, I don't remember that. Or like you're sitting there and another scene pops up, you're like, why is this even in here? This makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, I love Demolition Man, hands down, but the whole virtual reality intimacy part, that part didn't need to be in there.
It was just very awkward. I get the point they were trying to make, I guess, but it's.
Again, I get it, but that could have been just dialogue. I didn't need to see Stallone that way.
Hadn't really thought of it like that before.
There you go. You're welcome.
Adrian!
Oh, man.
Speaking of people taking their clothes off, what about Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi?
Well, I mean, that was a lot of people.
And not saying that guys can't take their shirts off and it's any different, but it seemed so awkwardly out of place that there hasn't been, with the exception of Slave Leia, has there been another Star Wars character that has been shirtless in the movie in 9 movies?
No, I don't think so.
I can't think of any.
Well, that one just kind of came out of the blue too, like, and he was wearing like high-waisted pants, so it just looked awkward. It looked like grandfather's at the nursing home, he can't find his shirt, type of thing, and I'm like, because even in the movie I was like,
use the force, use the force,
right. Force yourself to wear a shirt.
There's also the Kingsman Golden Circle. The end of the movie when he goes in there and he basically decides to save the world in exchange for some backdoor shenanigans to put it safe for radio. Like, well,
I remember. So I took my dad to see that movie, and that scene came up, and I just like, I laughed. I was like, "Oh, that's awkward. Why?" There's so many of them, and like I said, like now that we're a parent, or even in like just so we've seen so many movies. You watch a movie and you're like, "Why is this scene here?" And there's still movies nowadays that's the story of it. I just saw one the other day. I don't remember what it was, but it was the wife and I looked at each other like, well, that had nothing to do with anything. That was a waste of like 10 minutes of the movie. Like, yeah, I get that you want to reach a certain screen time, but
yeah, and we are well known for our random tangents. But when you're putting a movie together, isn't somebody there like a director to Ray? And you're like, whoa, no, let's keep this on point with the story here. Like, and we could probably go on for hours. We'll probably start cutting it short here so people can get back to their merry little lives, their geekish desires. But
that's what I want to do. I want the people to chime in, because I know that there is a ton more movies out there that have parts in it where you watch it and you're like, this is just awkward. This doesn't add anything to the story. Why is this here? This makes me leave the movie.
Yeah, so what I'm going to start doing, I'm going to try doing compile a list of what we think are some of the most awkward scenes in movie history. I put it together, and I want to include your thoughts. So let us know on at Get Geekish, and what are some of those movie scenes or TV show scenes that are so out of place that they just shouldn't be there, or they almost ruined the entire production.
There's quite a few.
That sounds like such a downer, but it's a fun topic. It just, I mean, like, half the movies we talked about are movies I actually like, but there happens to be a scene where you're like, I don't know what's happening. Okay, whatever. But we appreciate you listening. Any parting words?
I
figured I'd make it awkward one more time.
I was gonna say that you kind of put me on the spot. That I thought you were just rolling with it.
Anyway, let us know at Get Geekish. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk at you next week.